Orlando Magic, Orlando Magic, Orlando Magic. Boom. So, you're here because you don't understand the NBA. About a year ago, I made a video called An Idiot's Guide to Picking an NBA Team. So, I thought, let me switch it up and make an idiot's guide to the NBA. Let's go. So the NBA, the National Basketball Association, the biggest basketball league in the world, bigger than the Euro League, bigger than, I don't know what the other leagues are called, the Puerto Rican League, the Taiwanese League, some of the other leagues in the world, the Chinese Basketball League, CBA, Chinese Basketball Association, Chinese Basketball League, CBO? Yeah. I don't know, nobody cares. The only one that really matters is the NBA. So, in the NBA, there's 30 different teams, 15 in the East and 15 in the West. In the West, we have teams like the Los Angeles Lakers and the Golden State Warriors in California. We also have teams where it isn't split perfectly, so even teams in the Midwest like the Oklahoma City Thunder are pushed out to the West, even though they're really on the eastern side of America. But it's split near enough as best as they could, and they've come up with a league where there's 15 on the East, 15 on the West. And in these teams in the East and West, there are 3 different divisions. In the East, you have the Atlantic Division, the Central Division, and the Southeast Division. In the West, you have the Pacific Division, the Northwest Division, and the Southwest Division. Cool. If you're keeping up with me and you're interested about basketball, where I usually go to understand and get the game is I will exit full screen, scroll down a bit and hit that subscribe button. Make sure to subscribe, like the video, comment on the video, let me know you're here. And on the next video we might do something else, maybe a part 2 of picking NBA teams, maybe the actual rules of the game, but let's understand the league as a whole. So across an NBA season there are 82 regular season games. 82. Yeah, I know, that's a lot. And they play from October all the way across till April. But this is only the regular season. In the regular season, teams will go up against each other, go up against teams from the other conference twice, and you'll go against teams from your conference 3 times or 4 times, depending what division you're in. I'm not going to go into the complicated parts about division picking and how many games each one has, but just know you play teams in the West more if you're on a West team, and you play teams in the East more if you're an East team. But after the regular season, you approach the NBA playoffs. That's where we're at right now, the NBA playoffs. Now this is where it really matters. The regular season lets you know where you are across the entire league. So from 1st to 15th in your division, the top 8 teams go through to the playoffs. But there is something now that's been introduced called the play-in tournament. Now the play-in tournament exists between the 7th and the 10th seeds of the divisions, of the conferences, sorry. So the 7th seed will play against the 8th seed, the 9th seed will play against the 10th seed. The winner of the 7th versus 8th seed will go on to be the 7th seed, and the winner of the 9th versus 10th seed will face the 8th seed or the loser of the 7th, 8th seed to see who will be the 8th seed eventually. So, let's say, in the East, let us say the Boston Celtics were the 7th seed, the New York Knicks were the 8th seed, the Milwaukee Bucks were the 9th seed, and the Washington Wizards, for example, were the 10th seed. If the Celtics beat the Knicks, and the Wizards beat the Bucks, the Celtics will become the 7th seed. The Knicks will now have to face the Wizards to see if they will be the 8th seed going into the playoffs. Now in the playoffs, you have a bracket function. So 8 teams in the East, 8 teams in the West, 4 different matchups to start off with in the first round. But the difference between the regular season and the playoffs is a 7-game series. That's why in the NBA, in the playoffs, it's a game of chess. And usually I will say the better team wins. Because ultimately, if you're the better team, you can strategize and evolve your team across a 7-game series. So it will be the 1st seed against the 8th seed, the 2nd seed against the 7th seed, the 3rd seed against the 6th seed, and then the 4 and 5 matchup. And they will get narrower and narrower until we get to the NBA Finals. Now the NBA Finals is the biggest event in basketball, without a doubt. It's a 7-game series between the champion of the East against the champion of the West. and whoever wins across that 7-game series, the first team to 4 wins ultimately are declared the NBA champions. I won't say world champions because you're not the world champions unless you face another team in the world.
World champion of what? The United States?
I'm just saying. So, for reference, last season's champions were the Denver Nuggets, and the finals MVP, the best player in the finals matchup, was Nikola Jokic. But I know you're wondering, what about awards? So, we have the MVP, the most valuable player. This is obviously across the regular season. In the regular season, we will look at who is the best player when it comes to their value to their team, the winning for their team, their box score statistics, and holistically how good they have been across that entire regular season. Watch my video to see who I think the MVP is. Next, you have the Defensive Player of the Year. That is for the best defensive player, looking at their steals, their blocks, their intimidation factor, their rim pressure, that kind of thing that they have defensively against the other players. Who prevents the most buckets, really and truly. Now, MVP centralizes more on winning. So if a team's winning more, they're more likely to have an MVP candidate on their team. But the Defensive Player of the Year is a bit less open and a bit less based upon winning. Next, we have the Rookie of the Year. In the NBA, every year we have an NBA draft where the best prospects we have seen in basketball for that season get ready and prepare themselves to enter the NBA. After entering the draft, the teams can pick them after they're assigned each pick based upon their winning. So for the worst team in the NBA, after lottery, you're most likely to get the #1 overall pick. So after this, they'll select their players, and any player that is their first season in the NBA is considered a rookie. And ultimately, whoever wins Rookie of the Year has been the best rookie across that regular season. Next, we have Sixth Man of the Year. This is something you wouldn't really necessarily see in other sports. You won't necessarily have a best bench player of the year in football, for example, but in the NBA, it's a bit more rotation. You swap and sub in players constantly throughout the game. And so your sixth man, the sixth man off the bench, the sixth person, obviously there's 5 players on the court, the sixth man, the best sixth man is declared the sixth man of the year. This year it was just won by Naz Reid, who I think is a really exciting player, an exciting prospect, and could prove to be a pretty decent starter, except not on the Timberwolves, that's the problem. And finally, of the important awards really, we have the most improved player, just won by Tyrese Maxey, and it dictates and shows, although recent years has been a bit stupid, obviously Ja Morant winning it, being the 2nd overall pick, but it shows the best player, the most improved player, the player that's improved the most from last season to this season. So if a player jumps up 7 points per game, 3 rebounds per game, and 4 assists per game, they will go up and become most improved player of the year. So, getting the awards out of the way, let's finally talk about trades. Now, trades are a concept that doesn't really exist in European sports. When looking at football, we have teams that buy other players, and then that player signs a contract with that team to agree to go to that team. It isn't really the same thing in basketball. In basketball, you are essentially signed to a contract with the NBA umbrella, the organization of the NBA, and each team retains the right to be able to trade you to another team. So if I am drafted by the Houston Rockets, for example, the Houston Rockets can decide one day, obviously given other rules, that they can trade me to the Oklahoma City Thunder, for example, until my contract expires, and then I get to choose what team I sign with. Teams can also trade their draft picks, so in any given year there might be a team with no picks and another team with 3 picks. Covering all bases, we know the NBA is an 82-game regular season that then goes into the playoffs to dictate who is the best team. We know there are multiple different awards, from the MVP to Defensive Player of the Year to even a 6th Man of the Year. And finally, we found out that you can trade players against their will, which is a bit crazy, to other teams, and you can also trade your draft picks. That is, I think, the basis for what the NBA is. If you have any other questions, leave them in the comments. If you have any other suggestions for what you think the foundations of the NBA are, leave them in the comments as well. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I will see you, man, in a bit. Boom.